Yeah.
I know what you mean, though. And you look across this weekend, and we'll talk about the games, but this weekend was phenomenal. The Investec Champions Cup is back. We've got world stars, Sia Khaleesi playing, Finn Russell. You know, the list goes on and on around who's playing in it and the who's who.
Well, Marcus Smith was top tier on the weekend, wasn't he?
He certainly was. Cometh the hour, cometh the man. You know, there's been loads of headlines around Owen Farrell stepping back and not playing the Six Nations. So who's next? The battle between him and George Ford last week, he won hands down. Then he goes over to Racing. And, you know, a Champions Cup game against one of the big teams. And, okay, they've lost Finn Russell this year, who's gone to Bath. But they were packed full of stars with Racing. And the stadium suits Quins, the fast pitch. But Marcus Smith, every part of his game yesterday, and we've said this about him before, he's got every facet to be a top-tier international rugby player if given the opportunity. And his stats, he beat 7 defenders yesterday, had 2 clean breaks, 4 break assists. He scored himself, his drop goal, his defence. I mean, every part of his game was top tier for me. And you know, the drop goal from 40-odd out from the goal line dropout to put them 10 points ahead, his game management. But ultimately, there was a couple of tackles in there that people are like, oh, geez, yeah. The try saver at one point as well. And people stood up and saw that. We know he's got the dancing feet. We know he's got the flair. We know he's got that game attacking ability to unpick a defence with footwork, short passes, pump and go, offloads, the magic. He's got all that. But he's also got game control. His defence was on point. His game understanding was on point. And, you know, we're not that far away from the Six Nations, are we? 6 weeks away? Something like that, 7 weeks away from the first game. And there's so many young English players that are now putting their hands up, but he's got both hands up saying, give me the jersey. And hopefully, as sad as it is that Owen Farrell isn't going to be playing the Six Nations for various reasons, it's a brilliant opportunity for Marcus Smith to grab the shirt with both hands and, you know, really play the way he wants to play in a jersey, you know, that he's at the minute deserving of.
I've not given Quins the credit they deserve. Like when they played against Sale, I know, look at me, I've been humbled.
Here it is.
I've been humbled. Here we go. But when they played against Sale, and we said, oh, they played well, their defence was phenomenal. I don't think I mentioned that against a phenomenal defensive side in Sale, but the physicality that they bring, they barred up. And watching them against Racing, they've got the complete game now. Like the breakdown with Will Evans in there, he got the turnover tackle at the end of the match when there might have been offside by a toe. Andy Goode, you were sending the clip around the group chat, weren't you?
No, I wasn't. No, James. No, it was you.
Was it me?
You.
Oh, was it me? Yeah, they're offside, but it's just right, a negative into a positive. But so they got the physicality around defence now. Jerry Flannery, he's probably been given that sole role. Danny Wilson's come in. He's a brilliant coach. He was great at Glasgow, had a little bit of time at Leicester as well. You mentioned Marcus Smith at the line. Don Brandt's looking lean. They look the complete team. And to go there and the way that Marcus Smith played, I reckon they are definitely contenders for sure. Yeah. And it's all about consistency with them. I was surprised actually how well they played away from home against Racing in that stadium.
Well, they like it there, don't they? Because they enjoy the razzmatazz. It's their kind of DNA of how they approach games, having fun and all that stuff. And the pitch and the fact that it's inside under a roof just suits them to play at a pace that they did. What do you mean they got better after Joe Marler got substituted and they scored 2 tries to win the game? What, Jim, what do you mean?
Oh, he's retiring, isn't he? He's had enough.
But yeah, they were class. You know, they were physical, took their opportunities. As you said, Don Brandt looked good again. And, you know, there were some questions over how he was performing previously. Brilliant for the club. I do question, Go on.
Do you think, Goody, now, off the back of Marcus Smith these last 2 weeks, well, it's 2 questions. Do you think he's been given the keys by Steve, therefore the confidence of being told that and maybe not having to live in Owen's shadow has allowed him to play like that the last couple of weeks? And if that isn't the case, is he definitely the starting 10 now ahead of George Ford?
Yeah, I don't think it's the case because Steve's not someone that will phone him up and say, hey, mate, I'm going to start you in 6 weeks. Just play well. He's the sort of coach that keeps them on their toes. But what I do know is, and Marcus Smith said it himself, he actually struggled a bit when he came back to the Prem after the World Cup because he'd been playing and training at fullback for 4 months. He'd hardly trained at 10 within the England World Cup squad. He was training evidently at fullback all the time. So he took a bit of time to adjust, but we've seen over the last couple of weeks, and he's comfortable in the Quins environment, isn't he? Where he is the boss. It runs through him and Danny Kerr and how they attack, and they've got a really good understanding. And he's full of confidence, full of beans. He's backed by Nick Evans to try stuff, and it comes off invariably for him. So I don't think he's been given that nod by Steve Borthwick. Second question, do I think he should start? 100%. And the big thing is, ultimately, he's played a lot under an Eddie Jones regime where Owen Farrell was captain as well, where he has had that pressure on him of, the alpha in the group. And even when he played when Owen was injured, I think, for a few games, it was still kind of the Eddie Jones way, and Eddie's the boss. And yes, the coach is the boss, of course he is, but he wasn't ever given free license. And this is a huge opportunity for Steve Borthwick now. You could list 7, 8, 9, 10 players, young English players, who are at the top of their game, the likes of Ollie Lawrence, the likes of Alfie Barbary. We're seeing Marcus Smith do it. We're seeing Will Joseph do it. You've got Freeman at Northampton carving up trees. Alex Mitchell's going well. We're seeing, who's the other squad? Ben Spencer, again, on fire for Bath. So there's all these young-ish, some of them, English players that are on fire for their clubs and play an exciting brand of rugby that Steve now needs to wipe the slate clean when we get towards the Six Nations, have a blueprint that gets these boys into his team and excel in what they're doing for their clubs in an international environment. And hopefully Marcus Smith gets to lead the charge from 10.
What about Henry Arundell, Goode? What do you know about that? Apparently, Borthwick with RFU, someone's given him an ultimatum that he's extended his deal with Racing and not available for the Six Nations. What do you know?
Not a lot, to be honest, in terms of what's signed officially. I do know that, up until he signs with someone, whether the RFU have given him a deadline. And this is the hard thing. No one's come out and said this is the situation with the RFU. It's a bit cloak and dagger at the minute, isn't it, as opposed to pure honesty. So there's the whole thing about Maro Itoje. We saw reports last week that they're thinking about topping up his contracts. No one from the RFU.
That's definitely happening.
Yeah.
But I'm in the RFU. Yeah.
But no one from the RFU's come out and even mentioned the word hybrid contract, have they? It's all sort of discussions behind closed doors. And I get you need a bit of privacy around contractual stuff, but give us a framework. Tell us what's going on so you can then judge a man. And do you know what? Henry Arundell has gone over to Racing. He's flown out the blocks for them, scoring tries for fun, brilliant tries as well. And Racing have obviously seen something and gone, actually, we want to lock him down for 3 years. And I don't blame him if he says, I'm just going to sign the Racing deal. A, it's probably more money. B, look at how he was treated during the World Cup. He got one shot, scored 5 tries and didn't play again. And it's the same coaches. There's no guarantee if he comes back to Bath on half his cash, probably. Although you never know with Bath because they seem to find it anywhere at the minute, don't they? If he's been given an ultimatum by the RFU, they're trying to coerce him to sign for Bath. Now, I don't think that's fair if that is the case. But we've all been there, Jim, haven't we, around contract negotiations where a club gives you a deadline day, an ultimatum to say, if it's not signed by this day, we're going to move on and look elsewhere. And, clubs have the right to do that. It's a tough one because if they're doing it for Maro Itoje, it's got to be there for everyone that they want in that there's been rumours of 25 players that they're going to offer these hybrid contracts to. Then you've got the issue of some are going to be in contract already, so do they need to offer it to them? Some are out of contract, so they need to do a bit more. And then there's going to be a bit of pushing and shoving from players around, well, if he's got that, why can't I get this? So it's difficult. If he signs an extension with Racing before the Six Nations, it sounds like he can't play. Which is a massive shame because they made the announcement, and maybe the RFU made the announcement post-World Cup that he could play to try and put a bit of heat on him to come back to the Premiership and Bath. But we'll find out over the next couple of weeks when something is made official. But we spoke about it with Maro. He's got to sum up what's best for him. And seeing what happened to him at the World Cup, there's absolutely no guarantee that Steve Borthwick would pick him, however he's playing. So, you then look at it and you have to make a decision for yourself. Financially, for the future, to secure what you think is going to be the best opportunity for you to enjoy your rugby as well, as much as the financial vulgarities of it. There's so many things that go into the melting pot, and he's certainly not guaranteed to get picked by Steve Borthwick. And maybe we've all not been privy to all the information, which we haven't between them. And maybe he feels the best place for him is Racing if he does sign a 3-year deal there.
You mentioned Marcus Smith before, Goody. Finn Smith, he seems to be getting better and better, isn't he? But he obviously, I'm not saying he's close to getting into the Six Nations, but his trajectory's heading towards an international call-up at some point, isn't it?
Yeah, well, he got called up recently, didn't he? I think he was in the World Cup wider squad to start off with. He's a lovely kid. We've had him on here. He's a really good player. Both sides of the ball. He likes to hit as well. But his game management and Saints and how they're playing at the minute with him, Freeman, Dingwall as well, all to the fore. And he's playing with Alex Mitchell, who, we've spoken about in spades on here around, how good he is and the pace that he plays at. He suits what Northampton are doing. And, we spoke about Saints last week, I think, about how they're barred up physically, defensively as well. And Finn Smith, he's definitely an option. Would I pick him ahead of Marcus Smith? No, not at the minute. But he is definitely a player for the future, for the now as well, in terms of being in the squad and growing his stature as a player and getting closer to that international capped experience. We've still got George Ford as well, who's playing exceptionally well for Sale as an experienced head. But Finn Smith's definitely in the picture.
Because not many people expected Saints to go up there and do a job at the Scotsman, did they?
Yeah, Northampton again, attack unbelievable, playing in the wide channels. Physically, they were at the races. They made 183 tackles, 49% gain line successes. Look at me just throwing out stats, but I think that gives you a decent snapshot. Not only do Northampton play a great style of rugby, like physically, we spoke about Quinns' defence. Northampton, the big work on looking for a defensive coach last year. Defences win championships, and they've sorted that out. And physically, they were just there. Love the look of Northampton. Scotstoun's not an easy place to go. We've been, as you say, Andrew, wax lyrical over Glasgow this season.
You have.
Well, I haven't, not really. Everyone has. I think they've looked okay. They've been in and out of games. I thought they were going to beat Northampton at home because the URC is so much better than
Is it,
the Prem.
though?
No, I've not said that. Other people are saying that. But yeah, Northampton look very, very good. And Glasgow looks a little bit shell-shocked.
You talk about, quickly, Jim, you talk about defence. Angus Scott Young, 25 tackles. How are
Aussie.
you?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Not that you'd say that Australians don't make loads of tackles, but there is a bit of a Michael Hooper look about the way that he plays.
No, you're right, Jim. They were shell-shocked a bit, Glasgow. And credit to Saints. In the Pissendoon rain, that sounded awful. It was Pissendoon, Jim. I'll say it again.
No, that's good. That's good. That was good.
It was Pissendoon.
It was Pissendoon in Scotstoun.
Yeah, there you go. And Saints fronted up. Freeman was class. Glasgow did look shell-shocked, and they did sort of battle back a little bit in the second half. They end up getting a penalty try. Ollie Smith scores a good one as well, but it was game over at that point. And Saints, I think Saints will be the only frustration with Saints. They didn't get a bonus point, and they might. I don't know. They should be good. They should be good, but there was an opportunity. They were so in control of that game to go on and get an attacking bonus point. That was the only frustration, I think, from their point of view. But tough one for Glasgow now. You lose your first home game in this shortened format, and it makes it a very, very hard proposition to come through from then. So we'll see what minerals they've got, Jim?
There we go. Hey, don't ever ask anyone from Glasgow what minerals they've got. Just then you get the Glasgow kiss.
How good was it to see a repeat of the final in the opening round?
Unreal. Awesome.
Yeah,
that's a proper game first up. Almost spoiled, aren't you, to get that first up? And you think of the emotion from a Leinster perspective. Yeah, repeat back-to-back finals, and you're going down to La Rochelle, Roden O'Gara. They're going on for a treble. Dynasty, all of these things. Leinster, we've spoken about it on here, loads of pressure because they're very rarely tested in the lead up to the knockout stages. Doesn't get any bigger, does it, against La Rochelle, who are fully loaded. I thought Leinster were wicked. It does seem like, and it's very early to say, isn't it? And you can't go off the back of a last-minute win against Connacht that Jack Nienaber comes in and change the mindset. But I do think he's going to make a difference to that Leinster team. Did we see that against La Rochelle? It was still very close, wasn't it? But yeah, proper game, like level of intensity. La Rochelle actually haven't been playing well this season, though.
No,
the results and stuff in the lead up to it, the stuff around Rog being... Was he red carded or he's cited, weren't he?
Yeah, he got another touchline, but so he had a touchline ban this weekend. He was up in the box. Basically, he's been talking to French referees, and he said previously he's made some comments and with fourth officials and stuff that he shouldn't have done, but he learnt his lesson, and then he asked a question apparently a couple of weeks ago. And he said he wrote in his column that he said he felt because he's Irish, they treat him a different way to a Christophe Urios, for example, who's obviously French as they come and shouts and says what he wants and gets away with it. So I think he's feeling a bit of pressure at the minute with the way the French league and the disciplinary process there have treated him, but it would have hurt him. And they've not played well at the start of the year. They've had a few changes. They had a load of players away at the World Cup. They're starting to get them back. But it was, do you know what that game reminded me of, Jim? And you'd have seen this firsthand. So the start of that game, La Rochelle against Leinster, obviously it was pissing down with rain. The weather was shocking. We know it comes in off the Atlantic coast there. But the intensity and the physicality in the first 10 or 15 minutes was very similar to something like Ireland, South Africa at the World Cup, where it was...
What about Big Willie, Little Willie clearing rucks?
Oh, mate.
What about... Oh, my.
You're glad you retired at that point when you're seeing that?
It was, yeah. But you're right, the level of intensity, the physicality. Like, they're two test match teams. Like, La Rochelle fully loaded. And Will Skelton's huge for them. But when he blitzed James Ryan in that breakdown, I was like, you gassed it.
Yeah, it was phenomenal. And that's the thing. You've got the last two finalists going at each other. Leinster have never beaten La Rochelle until this weekend in their own patch. The whole hurt around what happened at the end of the final last year in Leinster's home patch, effectively, the Aviva. Just kudos to Leinster, really. And it was a big shout. You talk about Jacques Nienaber. Massive shout to leave Van der Fleer on the bench as well.
Yeah.
Massive shout. Obviously, starts Connors ahead of him. And I'm like, that's ballsy. Ballsy as you like. But he comes on, angry man, causes havoc at breakdowns, and obviously gets the turnover that leads to Kieran Frawley. Oh, my das boot.
Top 60 metres, that's a dasty booty scooting. But didn't I say, I've said a few times about that kid, haven't I?
You have.
Give me that.
Yeah, you have. And my God, he can kick a goal, let me tell you. But yeah, Leinster, the physicality. La Rochelle, they've got a tough spell now. They've got to go to the Stormers in Cape Town, 6,000 miles, whatever it is. 6-day turnaround as well.
Mental.
Yeah, and I was talking about the Stormers, chatting to John Dobson, our mate, before the game, saw him. He was asking after you, Jim.
Was he?
No, he wasn't. No, he wasn't. No, he was. He's like...
He was, yeah.
He's like that bit...
But what was he saying?
He said to me, that big idiot's gone to Pretoria. Why didn't he come to Cape Town, eh? And I'm like, yeah, mate.
Is he German?
Yeah, he's German. Das ist die
Australian.
Yeah.
He's like, das ist the Australian, the Germany.
Yeah. But it was great to see him, great to talk to him, and he's always got a smile on his face. Infectious bloke. He wanted... Yeah,
he really is. But on that, though, like, as in, you are right. And again, without calling anyone out, but whoever put the fixture list together, 6-day turnaround. I know the Stormers sent out the kids and nearly beat Leicester at Leicester. Yeah. But yeah, like, it's going to be tough now for La Rochelle. Like, I mean, I don't even know how do you get down to Cape Town from La Rochelle? Like, that's a couple of flights.
Well, you're going to Paris. You got to get the bus from La Rochelle to Paris, get on a plane from Paris.
Oh, gosh.
Imagine the size of that bus for La Rochelle. It's got to be massive, isn't it?
No, it's not. You know their school buses they take them
yeah, but the size of the human beings there. So yeah, I mean, that's a huge game because La Rochelle, the champ. Imagine being champions, play 2, lost 2. If they go, because the Stormers are playing their big boys. Martin Lebock will be playing. They'll all be playing that game. Haven't spoken to John Dobson before the game, and chatting about the 6-day turnaround is ridiculous, but logistically, I don't know. It should be a minimum 7-day turnaround for South African teams or a team that is going to South Africa because you've got to factor in the travel. But it's not as easy as people make out, just saying, right, well, we'll play them there and this team there. And I was chatting to Dobbo and I said, obviously you've got the travel to deal with. You pick the kids and the OAPs. There was a 38-year-old Brock Harris playing for him. My God, he did well, to be fair. But you're then looking at it and he said, look, we can't actually play at home this week because there's a sevens on in the Cape Town Stadium. So, logistically, everything else that goes into stuff, they have to try and factor in. And it is a real difficult jigsaw to pull together. But they need to find a way that it's 7 days in between any game that involves a South African team travelling or a team travelling to South Africa to play as well, because, as you saw with the Sarries boys, and we'll get onto that game in a bit, they looked fucked.
Well, Jim, you were vice-captain or co-captain. What did you make of James Ryan not being allowed to talk to Matthew Carley, or Matthew Carley refusing to talk to James Ryan as co-captain?
That's a big talking point, isn't it, out of the game? Because I reckon James Ryan wouldn't be far away from the Ireland captaincy as well. And we know Johnny's history around talking to referees. We spoke about Owen, we spoke about Dan Bigger. It's a thing, right? And the Champions Cup is such a high level. You're up against the champions away from home. You're fully emotionally in that zone, and we know that the difference between being a captain and the very best captains, we know the difference between being a captain and a great captain is how you interact with the referees, and it's becoming a thing now. It's becoming very topical, and being called out, I'm sure James Ryan feels quite embarrassed by that, but I'm blaming Big Willie, Little Willie Skelton when he gets absolutely blitzed at the side of the ruck. And it's a thing. You've seen James Ryan before. It was almost cometh the hour, cometh the man a few years ago in that game with James Ryan, wasn't it? I think, well, we heard that he didn't get picked for the Lions off the back of that game against La Rochelle, but it turns out it was actually James Ryan who decided not to go on the tour. So it was a bit harsh that we said that, but he got bullied by La Rochelle, and he's fronted up recently, and he's taken himself to a physical level, and you can see how emotionally charged he was. But for Matt Carley to say, look, mate, I ain't speaking to you anymore. You can bring your vice-captain, your co-captain, Gary Ringrose, to start talking to me. It's a rude awakening for him, if we are speaking frank.
Yeah, and it's one of those things that I think more referees are going to start treating players like that. We have seen more and more appealing and moaning and everyone throwing their hands in the air at referees a lot. And it's grown into this thing. We've seen referees sort of complain about the treatment they get on social media, which is completely fair. But across, and it's a societal issue, as we said last week, it's becoming ingrained in the players to appeal for everything, throw their hands up, hold their heads and all this stuff if they've been hit. So referees need to be protected in a way. And Matt Carley's made a stance against James Ryan, constantly appealing for stuff. And you hope that it's consistent across the board, because we know other referees let things go more than others, and we know other players go after referees as much as some of the names you mentioned there, Jim, around players appealing for everything. We had Jamie Ritchie on the pod the other week, didn't we? And it was something that you mentioned as well around his interaction with referees. Players have to be careful, and it's that fine balance between the emotion, being the captain, challenging a referee enough to make him think about things, but also doing it in a right tone that doesn't piss him off so he doesn't talk to you anymore. So James Ryan will learn from it, and I'm sure he apologised to Matt Carley after the game, and it's a lesson for him and a lot of other players of how to conduct yourself around referees now.
Do you know, on that note, and I can say this now, and I'll tell you the reason why I can say it now, chatting to referees, so of the last generation of players, who do you think they said the best captain they've worked with?
Internationally or club level?
Internationally.
Oh.
Internationally.
Across
the board, in terms of, like, I said to a few referees, who's the very best captain?
Anton Dupont.
No, Andy Rowe. No.
Sia Khaleesi.
Nope.
Jamie Ritchie.
No, he should have retired 10 years ago. But he's only just retired.
Alan Wynne.
Alan Wynne.
Yeah.
All the referees said that he is the very best captain they've worked with. And you think back to how he interacts with the referees, soft-spoken, the old Jono down on the haunches, challenged at the right times. There's an emotional intelligence. There's a skill in doing that. So there you go, Alan Wynne-Jones.
That's a lesson for you.
Don't come back. I mean, you're absolutely buggered, but he was the best.
He can still do a job, Alan Wynne. He can still do it. He set up a try with his last touch to win Toulon the game. After he'd had 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's because
after he'd had 10 minutes off.
Steaming,
yeah, we'd had 10 minutes off and it seized up, and he still can produce, man. That boy can produce.
Sarries didn't really endear themselves to the referee on the weekend, did they, Jim? Discipline an issue?
Yeah, discipline was clearly an issue. 2 yellow cards and a red card. But my goodness me, the Vodacom balls came flying out the box. So we can get onto the discipline side of things, which has been an issue for Saracens, especially in that game. But I just thought the Bulls looked brilliant. They looked physical. The back three, their kicking game, Curtly Aronson.
Oh, good.
Just took it to unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like you've got, and this is what I mean. This is without look at Rob licking his lips on this. I reckon they've got the best back three in the Investec Champions Cup with Caden Moody, Willie LaRue, who's my best mate now, and Curtly Aronson on the left wing.
Look,
like as in that, the back three look unbelievable.
Look at you, just back in Villy Lapoo to Villy Lagoo.
No, Villy Lagoo. But the altitude, don't get me wrong, is definitely a thing.
It's a huge factor.
And we were talking about it in the lead up, in the build up to it. So you factor in the travel. Saracens played against Northampton last week. Then you jump on a plane. You got to try and acclimatise there. So the heat, it was hot all week in training. And yes, the lads can say, yeah, we're up to the level, no pun intended, of the altitude and stuff. They've even got a sign as they walk out. So like in Liverpool, they've got welcome to Anfield. At the Vodacom balls at Loftus Versfeld, it's got, as they're walking out, it says altitude, full stop, 1,350 metres. It matters. That's the last thing you see.
It does.
As you walk out with your snorkel into the stadium. So they were clearly struggling. And I don't know, it just felt like they were off. Like emotionally, they were off. Their defence was poor. Discipline was poor, we mentioned. But they nearly came back at the end with 14 men. So
this is the big thing. When you talk about altitude, I played there a couple of times at altitude in South Africa. People say it hits you after about 10, 15 minutes. Like you literally cannot grasp for air. And so the Bulls came out and played at a pace and an intensity at the start of the game. And I'm like, oh my God, this could be an absolute hockeying for Saracens. And we'll get onto the discipline issues. You look at the three cards they got, 2 yellows. Alex Goode, I thought, was really unlucky. He's got away with those before, and you go into the depths of the law, and he can stand his ground. He cannot move or make himself any bigger when a chip kick goes over the top of him. And if you look, he just turns a slight bit and moves his shoulders, and his arse falls out a little bit. I thought he was unlucky. I didn't think that was probably a yellow card. And then Marrow's one. Marrow's was crazy, a real stupid yellow card. But then I'm seeing him as he's jogging off to the sin bin, and I was like, wise man, he is absolutely fucked. He needs 10 minutes off because of the altitude. So, his was a blatant yellow card. There was, a number of discipline issues before that around penalties, and his was, you can't dive over a ruck and slap the scrum off, forcing a knock on or whatever. It's just, that was.
Well, he's done it many times and got away with it. Like that's a mecca. I agree. I don't like that. I used to as a player. He's got away with that loads. So that's why he's probably done it.
Laws have changed though. You can't do it anymore. He probably could at some stages when he was doing it, and when you were doing it, when you played, you could get away with it. But the laws have changed.
Well, you couldn't. Well, I never did.
Yeah. And then Billy's red card. I ain't having it. I even saw Dan Robson tweeted something at the weekend about players holding their heads appealing for stuff. Get yourselves off for an HIA if you're going to appeal like that. And you saw it. Billy's come in. He is illegal in how he's approaching the ruck, but you see how South Africans fly into rucks as well. It just so happens that with his one, he hardly even brushes the lad's face, and he's gone down like he's been melted full on in the nose. And there's too much gamesmanship for me around that stuff at the minute. We've spoken about other instances where players are holding heads and all that stuff before, but Billy's one's a yellow card at best. He's illegal going into the clear out.
Reckless
entry, all that stuff. But the impact and the fact that there's mitigation because the Bulls player falls backwards and is sort of getting out the ruck, I think there should have been some mitigation against it, and it should have just been a yellow card. So you can talk about Saracens' discipline issues as much as you want. I thought they were very unlucky with 2 of their cards. And then they showed a bit of fight to come back. But let's be honest, the Bulls at home in Pretoria at altitude, with the way they sped through the gears at times, Curtly Aronson and Caden Moody just absolutely ripping them to pieces at times. They were fully deserved winners. And, Saracens, it's interesting because you look at Sarries, they've got to come back now from South Africa. Some people are like, why have they sent all the big dogs over there? Like, in this tournament, you could have sent a second team. And I asked you, didn't I, Jim? I'm like, why did they go and risk all the big dogs? Because Billy will pick up a ban now, more than likely. The knock-on effect of the travel this week and how much it takes out of them. And then you said to me, James, that they got loads of injuries, haven't they?
Yeah, they've got a few injuries. They're thin on the ground. But with Saracens, they wanted to make a statement. Yeah. I agree with you. When you look at it and you look at the Stormers and then they're going to go full noise at home and the travel aspect around that. Last week, losing against Northampton, the way in which they did the stuff around Faz, I think they wanted to make a statement. Yeah. Probably unsure to actually how good the balls are and how tough it was going to be to play in that stadium. But it was wicked to be there. I think the South African teams to watch is definitely going to be the Vodacom Bulls, and it'll be interesting to see how the Stormers go fully loaded against La Rochelle at home. Yeah.
To be fair to Sarries, they've only got Connacht this week. I say only because they got absolutely hosed at home. So you'd back Sarries to bounce back this weekend.
Goody, you were on comms for the Leicester game, weren't you?
I was. A few bits to talk about the Leicester Stormers game. Stormers, obviously, and we mentioned it earlier when we chatted about John Dobson. Stormers sent a 2nd/3rd team with an eye on next week's game against La Rochelle, leaving a lot of their stars back in South Africa. But my God, they turned up. And I spoke to Dobbo before the game and he was like, I'm telling you, my bro, these guys, they will fight, eh? There'll be a fight. And I'm looking at them and going through the team sheets and doing your prep for the commentary and all this stuff. Didn't know a lot about some of them. So we're having to Google them and look at all their notes that Tim did for us. And you sat there going, like, this should be comfortable for Leicester, but like any South African team you've ever played against, they'll fight and come hard and keep coming. Whether they're young kids, whether they're old blokes. And shout out to Brock Harris, he's about 49. He's got calves the size of Jim's, but he can scrummage to the cowsheds and back.
What, massive then?
Tiny.
Massive, big, veiny, throbbing things?
No, really? That's the other thing that you've got that's throbbing. Young fly-half, Mathieu, was playing 10, his Stormers debut. People hadn't heard of him. He had a really good game. Marabi at 8 was class. Big, powerful lad. But talking about Leicester, I think they had one eye on their Christmas party, Jim, because it was their Christmas party that night. And I've got a bit of a story about that as well. But they just made errors. Freddie Stewart dropped the ball about 5 times. Like, never seen it from Freddie Stewart. Jasper Visa picks the ball up from the back of the scrum. All he's doing is eyeing up the 10 to try and run straight over him. Just leaves the ball behind. And off the back of that, the Stormers score. There was another one, the ball squirted out the back of a scrum. Devet, the scrum half, hacks on and scores a try just before half time. So they weren't at the races in the first half. I think they were too interested in the Christmas party, but they got there in the end. Andre Pollard stepped up, scored a try, kicked some goals, created a try with Jamie Shilcock. Unbelievable pass from Jamie Shilcock, by the way. 30 metres in the wet to Josh Bassett to get the bonus point with the last play of the game. They didn't deserve the bonus point, and credit to the Stormers for everything that they put out there. But Leicester, they got the bonus point. They had their Christmas party. But no, good to get the win for them. Biggest attendance of the weekend across the whole competition, just shy of 20,000 there. So while they didn't perform very well and Dan McKellar was raging at half time, it was good to pull through the win.
Bath are doing well at the minute, Goody.
A lot of good young English players there. Finn's at the wheel. And they had a horrific record. I think it was like something like they'd lost their last 10 games in Europe or something crazy like that in the Champions Cup. And it was a big one for them. Ulster come to town. Ulster won there either last year or the year before and won comfortably. So big questions being asked. Ulster went into a bit of a lead, fought their way back. But the second half, 31-0. 31 unanswered points from Bath in the second half. Ben Spencer was on fire. Thokana Singer, he must listen to the pod because Jim called him out a few weeks back saying he just needs a bit more. He's given a bit more. Ollie Lawrence was on fire. The boy gets out of tackles, gets through tackles, offloading game. It's just off the charts good at the minute. So Bath really did shine. Benno Urbano got man of the match. Scrummage into the cowsheds and back. Stephen, take your kits off. He wasn't very good for Ulster. They got owned at scrum time, really. And it was a complete performance from Bath. Finn, doing Finn things. And they are genuine. I'm not sure whether they're contenders in the Champions Cup, but they're certainly contenders in the Prem. And they are bubbling along really nicely. So really disappointed in Ulster. No Mike Lowry, he was on the bench. Cooney was on the bench, but the second half, I just thought they threw the towel in a bit, to be honest. which is very un-Ulster-like. So big questions to be asked around them and their desire next week, obviously back at the Kingspan, but all about Bath. They were absolutely class, and it's a big win to start the tournament for them.
Pod.
Rugby pod.